Ananda Coomaraswamy's artistic intuition, in the sense that I was asked to present on Bhava, so concept of Bhava, but actually even concept, I don't think we used to say notion of Bhava is, it's all about deeply involved with Upanishadic. Since I'm also from philosophy department, I go with the deeper philosophical connotations of Coomaraswamy. So I'll go with my presentation first and answer all the questions also. Introduction. He was a tireless exponent of perennial philosophy, timeless kind of a, that means a kind of a Sanatana Dharma according to Indian context. It's still living. It doesn't mean a kind of a spirituality in a utopian sense. It's a kind of a very practical, secular spiritualism, and it was explored in all of his works. Though I also wonder why he didn't bring Abhinavagupta and Annavardhana, but it's all about their roots coming from Indian classical texts, especially Upanishads. And also he was very Platonic. In the sense, he speaks about Plato, and in other words, ideal in the sense very practical, not utopian, but in some ways it's ideal also in the sense it reconciles all these things in my presentation. So he was educated, as all we know. I skipped those things. He was he was a doctor of science degree holder. He was a scientist, but actually he spoke about philosophy of science also. He wrote lots of other things. He speaks about just like Plato. Plato spoke about all art forms are kind of a universal forms of mathematics. So even Plato said just like that. He was also later on, though he was a geologist, but later on he spoke on those lines, and from the scientific background, he evolved as an art philosopher, art historian first, art critic, and art philosopher. Wrote in many fields: science, history of art, history of philosophy, philosophy of art, criticism, metaphysics, literature, anthropology, psychology, nationalism, education. All these have some kind of have deeper roots. I think this is what why Ananda Coomaraswamy is relevant in 21st century. He's very relevant according to me or many of our scholars, because he wanted to have a kind of a deeper sense of interpretations on these lines, not merely a history of art in a tangible way. He spoke about intangible history or the cultural history beyond a kind of a deeper psychological history, deeper anthropological history, all along with interdisciplinary. So it's a very important message for us for education also. Yeah, nowadays we don't have kind of this deep kind of education system. Even in Sri Lanka, we don't teach Ananda Coomaraswamy. When I went to US, they are also students learning Ananda Coomaraswamy. But even Sri Lanka, we are not teaching. They are not included in the syllabus. So that's why I think we have to have a kind of a deeper messages of these issues. For example, if you say science, philosophy of science, or kind of a history of art is a kind of a philosophy of history of art, or metaphysics, not in the sense of theoretical sense. It's not only theory. It's a kind of I think even the Western philosophy we can bring Kant, but I remember when I talk about Kant, once Max Muller, even one great Indologist, he wrote, translated all about Indian culture, Indian text, all translations, and great Indologist, but there are some criticism on his dates also. But still, he mentioned once, he himself as a German, translated Kant's first critique of pure reason. while translating, he knows it's a very tough work. But after translating, he mentioned that the two pillars of West, Plato or Kant, even we can't compare with Upanishads. He's so great, so vast. I think another Coomaraswamy dipped into that message and exploring his universal vision through Upanishadic as well as Platonic. But even in Plato, we can say some kind of idealism, just like Professor mentioned. Plato even was criticizing art, but Coomaraswamy gives an apt interpretation of Plato, because that is the beauty of Coomaraswamy. He gets all the correct interpretation of each and every text, according to me. That deeper levels of philosophy, which Shankara's or Lankavatara Sutra, or lots of Buddhist texts, silver texts, Indian silver texts, or Brahmanas. I don't know whether he didn't mention about Abhinavagupta, but he spoke about Dhvani, suggestion, theory of suggestion in all messages. This comes from Upanishadic kind of a deeper understanding. So this kind of education, even Tagore I can bring, because in the Rojalab's Lipsis 3 volumes, we have one traditional art volume, other one is metaphysics, volume 1 metaphysics, third one is life and works. He has a chapter on Tagore's circle, 1909 to 1912. He was with Tagore. When Tagore says literature means reunion, sahitya. Sahitya means sakriya, same-heartedness. That is the root of, I think, artistic creation. That is mentioned even one of our Peradediya scholars. He did his PhD, Sanskrit scholar. He did his PhD in Mahayana Silpa text. He once mentioned, just like Ishavasya Upanishad says, one who sees himself in everything in himself sees the truth. That kind of same-heartedness, that is the deep message, deep kind of dhvani, suggestion, a common suggestion. This doesn't have a kind of a utopian kind of issue. It's very practical, changing our kind of a transformation or transformative function in art. So this is very root of Indian artistic creation. Doesn't mean spirituality. This is a kind of a secular spiritual. It transcends borders. So Tagore also it transcends borders. Sahitya means reunion with our own nature. Tagore wrote another book on Poet's Universal Man. That means we have to go with our kind of universality of experience. That is the perennial philosophy. Doesn't mean only we explain those things, but there are so many out, like other people also mentioned, just like Coomaraswamy mentioned. So more than 1,000 items, articles in a very reputed journals, as well as hundreds of books he wrote, all rooted in this philosophy of fairness. So it's a kind of an integral, universal understanding of world philosophy. A theory of suggestion is the root. I think that is the root of the Bhava. There are so many theories in the history of Indian aesthetics or Indian classical rhetoric or classical poetics. But we have this dhvani is very root, because that is a suggested meaning, a deep kind of a meaning, a subjective universality. It's introspective at the same time universal. That is, it's all about Indian classical visual art, sculptures. For example, Buddha image, origin of Buddha image. We see that it's contemplative, but at the same time universal, inwardness. The objectivity of so-called science is not enough. The objectivity of subjective universalities, we can't mention about that. But that is when I read Kant, I didn't think this is a new thing because I was so much involved in Indian also. We have lots of issues on that. That is very, very prominent in Coomaraswamy's universal vision. That is philosophy of prana. That is the root of his Bhava theory. Even theory, I don't say it's theory, and he wrote lots of issues. Simply, I'm bringing that is a stick. Sorry. Science is all about his writings. Open letter to the Canadian chief. This is the first article he wrote on Sunday Observer, a newspaper, and later it was published. Because this is first he was trained as a doctor of science degree holder in the scientific field, but later when he was in Sri Lanka, he formed a social reform society and he was working for a geological mission. And that time he saw under the colonial influence, we forgot our own heritage, and he himself half British, half Sri Lankan, but he fought against colonial rulers in artistic way. A kind of he mentioned all these issues, open letter to Canadian chiefs and Canadian art and what is meant and how it ended, and family Canadian literature and medieval Sinhalese art. His intellectual career begins with 1908, encyclopedia like a volume called Medieval Sinhalese Art. That is the first publication in 1908, and Aims of Indian Art. These two, his first publications, and later on ended up with Time and Eternity in 1947 and Am I Brother's Keeper. Until then, he wrote lots of issues. I think he was serving as a curator for Boston Museum for 30 years. Most creative period, those things. But I'm taking only one or two books here because so vast area. Even for one book, one chapter, we can't finish within an hour. So these are his writings. The Dance of Shiva. Here, the collection of 14 articles. The first article, since I'm dealing with Indian notion of Bhava, their theory of beauty, the first article deals with what has India contributed to the world's civilization. Each and every country contributes something substantial to the world civilization. So, from their self-expression or self-expression. So, the Indian contribution comes from her philosophy. It doesn't mean others do not know about this. Jesus Christ, Tao, Rumi, or Blake, all of them say the same thing, that is oneness of all beings is the root of all that is connected in India. It connects this the basic principle with all of her other fields like art. For example, if you listen to a piece of music, we understand that kind of experience. It's a kind of a interpersonal intersubjectivity. Even in very recently, I was listening some podcast from Department of Interpersonal Psychology professor talking about that the art is a kind of a base for the interpersonal psychology. Even he in Rogelici's book, he had two chapters. One and the only transmigrant. That chapter deals with this, that thou art, or the core messages of Indian Upanishadic philosophy is rooted in kind of a oneness of all beings. That is rooted in all the issues, or it is a root for all interdisciplinary connections. So, even not only in India, even the whole history of Western philosophy also, Plato also talked about that. They also have an like Aristotle talked about all physics or mathematics and art. Or art, even if I take Plato, he himself refuted, as Professor mentioned, the sensual thing he refuted. But actually, nowadays there's a criticism against that also. It's a pure idealism, a kind of a utopian kind of a thing. Even Kant also mentioned Plato was too idealist. There's a metaphor on a bird flying on the sky against the airspace, against the air, struggling to fly. Then the dove thinking it should go beyond the airspace to fly easily. That's just like Plato. That means it's a kind of a too much of maybe idealism. It goes beyond a kind of a more than sensual. That doesn't mean rejecting senses, but it goes with a more kind of a deeper levels of soul. At knowing, no, I think there are, even in human anthropology, we have three levels, like one sensual, intellectual, and as Professor mentioned, intellectual in Ananda Kumaraswamy, when I read Ananda Kumaraswamy, and that he quotes some intellectual beauty from St. Thomas Aquinas and the medieval Plotinus and all these people. But that intellectuality is not like it's a kind of a higher wisdom, kind of first order intellectualism, not the so-called. Because even Ananda Kumaraswamy brings Nagarjuna and Lankavatara Sutra, these all Buddhist texts, they deal with Nagarjuna. For example, Nagarjuna deals with Shunyata. He brings Nagarjuna also in Dance Shiva, in one place, I don't know where I got it. Nagarjuna and Shankara. That is very, very, even Nagarjuna said it transcends intellectuality. That doesn't mean intellectualism is reason in the so-called level. I think Kant's critique of pure reason also is that. Doesn't mean critique of the intellectuality in a theoretical level. Here also he mentions of metaphysics. Doesn't mean only theoretical level. Kant refuted all theoretical metaphysics. I think in Upanishads also, it doesn't deal with theory of metaphysics. It deals with conscious level of understanding of metaphysics within. Even we, our being, doesn't mean metaphysics, something about God, concept of God, or concept of soul, or some kind of a rationality of world, or reasoning on, cosmology, or psychology. So-called psychology, so-called cosmology, and so-called theology refuted. Kumaraswamy, many places he's bringing the so-called theology is part of, it's a function to understand self-realization, to understand ourselves in a universal sense, where we can transcend these narrow borders. I think this is the message I got it from there, not the intellectuality of reason in a so-called sense or theoretical reason. It transcends theory, even in Nagarjuna, in the first Dhyana slogan, he mentions all kind of dialectical 4 pairs of laws, and it all transcends, all the theories transcends, means this understanding transcends kind of all theoretical level. I think when I read that also, I had a question that maybe I understood in that intellectuality of art is not the intellectualization of pure reason. It's a kind of a deeper reason. So that he brings in many ways. There is an answer for professor's paper also. It's a kind of a higher wisdom, knowing by being. Bhagavad Gita, he quotes many places. And even Plato said art is a skill in action. Karmeshu Kausham in the Bhagavad Gita, Samatvam Yogam Ichyate means Samabhava. That is the issue I am bringing here. Even in Nagarjuna, Nagarjuna's philosophy is called Madhyamika or Shunyata. The understanding of Shunyata is middle. That is the root of all kind of a deeper understanding. That that issue is even we can talk about in the summer power, even lots of Tibetan kind of Buddhist philosophers talk about those things. So Anandamasan brings those things. So he's most involved in those kind of issues, and also the second chapter of Dance of Shiva, theory of art. In Hindu view of art, historical. He brings from Vedic to up to Tagore. He ends that chapter with Tagore's poem. That means the India has a kind of a deeper meaning of philosophical issues in art, and also Vedic art is very practical, just like Plato says is technique, and Coomaraswamy never wanted to separate fine art and useful art. And he spoke about folk art and primitive art. Doesn't mean he spoke all the way, always spirituality in a very high sense. Even in folk art, we can have spirituality. It's kind of a transpersonal, transcultural, kind of a deeper levels we can touch in classical religious art or in the folk art or in any kinds of art. So that kind of, but it should touch, according to him, that deeper level of interpersonal or intersubjective or kind of a transcultural kind of a deeper levels of understanding. So here, and also he talked about like more on an existential understanding. I think that also nowadays art history people or students or the departments, academia, he was very critical about academic, about art history, because they talk about now modernism, very current trend is postmodernism. In my opinion, even there's a criticism, there are good things also in postmodernism. But Nietzsche, in Dance of Shiva, the last chapter on Nietzsche actually first existential philosophy in the West. Because Coomaraswamy liked Nietzsche because existential, first time they are crossing concepts and going for being is an existential kind of understanding. And he says he's like a bodhisattva or kind of a mystic or oneness. He understood the oneness. And even Nietzsche spoke about art. Heidegger brings those things. I don't know, Heidegger is not that progressive in the political field. But Nietzsche talked about form itself is an art. And art is a form of a kind of a counter movement of European nihilism, according to Nietzsche. I think these kind of issues, that means not only intellectualization as theoretical intellectualization, but our deeper understanding in India is a conscious understanding, not only knowing by intellect, knowing by being. In many places, Bhava mentioned Atma. You can understand Atma with Atma. Atma doesn't mean a narrow self. It's a kind of a universal self. I think that's why Tagore also wrote towards universal man. And all about Plato's idea also towards universality. That kind of the form, that forms and the contents, that the forms mean a kind of a universality doesn't mean it's all abstract nihilism or kind of deeper kind of utopian things, but it's very practical in Indian sense. But because of colonization, even Coomaraswamy passed away just after Indian independence from British. He said, "Be yourself." One message: be yourself. That means we have our practical, very deeper understanding for practical progressive elements. It's a very progressive understanding, according to Coomaraswamy also. He wrote about that in those lines, and even in that book, there's a chapter on origin of Buddhist image. Everywhere he quotes from all the texts. Even it looks like his footnotes, a kind of we can have a separate books on book footnotes. So each and every, even when we were undergraduate, we used to learn from under the tree like Shantiniketan, under Coomaraswamy. Just 2 hours we can study only 2 pages. So that kind of a richness, so vast, so rich, and how come he connects these parallels with world literature, the world cultures? I think that is, even Kant once said, when Kant also wanted to give a methodology, his first book, Critique of Pure Reason, is a book on methodology. He wanted to give a methodology for sciences and ethics. So he wanted to give a philosophy as a whole, not only theory and practice combined. Again, in his third critique, the second critique deals with ethics, the third critique deals with art aesthetics. He speaks about subjective view and he says it reconciles theory and practice. Only in art we can reconcile theory and practice. So that is his message. Like that, we can see these issues in Asian philosophy also. He says in one place, art should give not pleasure but peace. Yeah, that is the sum of power. I think that is my actually theme here. Sthayi Bhava, again, I don't know whether he didn't quote that, but I understand in Abhinava Gupta, even Bharatanatyam Shastra, we have 8 rasas. Even in Tolkappiyam, we have this in pure Tamil terms, the 8 rasas. Every rasa has a Sthayi Bhava, but Bhavas of Bhava is Sthayi Bhava, is Sama. That also mentioned in Tolkappiyam as well as in Natya Shastra Sutra mentions. But later on, Abhinava Gupta in 10th century, he wrote commentaries on this Natya Shastra and Dvanyaloka. He brings that the basic mode as separate bhava, as Shanta Rasa. That is the 9th rasa later on from 10th century onwards. I think that is all about Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist art, also from there. Not only Buddhism, and Buddhism even in Coomaraswamy's understanding, Buddhism and Indian, same India, never separated. When Tagore also says, it's all one Indian evolution, all about Buddhist art, but it's the hermeneutics of Buddha statue or Buddha image, or it's a silence of hermeneutics of silence. So that one is all also a kind of a transformative kind of a function of what he mentions. Even Coomaraswamy mentioned about those things in the Buddhist. One of his interpretations with the Buddhist art. He talks about lots of issues on that. Bhava, the Sthayi Bhava as summer. That is the only meaning I'm taking here. Like rasa as Brahman, even in Upanishads, we talk about rasa as Brahman. Even when I visited Buddha Gaya, one who knows Brahman is Brahman. Sorry, Brahmana. That is the state in the Buddha student. That means same line. This is not a separate issue, but now so-called kind of specialization. They are now our academia doesn't want to cross borders. There's no cross-culturalism. There's no cross kind of a disciplinary understanding. It's all about ancient fields. Even the natural science, we have the whole natural sciences with philosophy. Only natural science they separately after Newton's time. At the same time, psychology is all about philosophy up to 18th, 19th century. So it's all combined those lines. Even one of our departments also philosophy and psychology. But nowadays we never interact with each other. Like it's all one basis for Coomaraswamy also. That's how he's rooted in a kind of a deeper understanding. So he wrote on different issues and taking only few issues. This is again Professor mentioned the transformation of nature in art. Again, according to Coomaraswamy, he is the person who supported this Asian interpretation. That time, even in the colonial era, he wanted to promote Asian interpretations. He introduced East to the West. At the same time, he introduced classical West to the East, the West, East as well as the West. He was cardinal critic of modern ideas, like modern, now not only modern, I think in Coomaraswamy's period, there were so many British philosophies. I think positivism, he was against positivism and scientism. He brings philosophy of science with, I think, philosophy of mathematics. He was quoting his Christian and Oriental art. Last chapter on Professor Hardy wrote Apology of Beauty of Mathematics. He brings that and spoke about Bhava Gita and quoting many Buddhist texts and bringing that deeper levels of understanding about Professor Hardy. I think you know about him after watching the Hollywood movie, The Man Who Knew Infinity, is all about Ramanujan's genius, the mathematical genius from India. All about that, he talked about the beauty of mathematics. He was quoting that. So this is all about the universality. When the paintings nowadays we teach only the so-called mathematics. Even Plato said, without mathematics, don't enter the academy, his university. That means mathematics, why mathematics is very relevant to art. All the art forms are connected with mathematics. I think architecture, music, or art, paintings, everything related to mathematics. So it's universal. Plato also wanted to spoke about this perennial message, why mathematics he brought, not only the so-called mathematics, but we teach in the classroom now. Mathematics itself is an art form. It's an eternal, capturing the eternal forms. So he's all about talking about that metaphors. He's all about that kind of a metaphors. Because we can't capture those things. Even other than I can say, he talked about very subtle issue. He brings kind of a dialectics. Even Upanishads all about dialectics. All dialectics, even all the basis, even Plato. The dialectics is a powerful method of philosophy. That means we can't capture directly. In philosophy, we use dialectics. That also form of language. Indirectly, we are capturing. So metaphors, indirectly capturing the deeper meanings. Or these kind of issues are very, very important in Asian philosophy. Deeply rooted, and even when I was in Washington somewhere long ago, there was a presentation on Plato's Phaedrus and Kathopanishad. I think you can mention, see about, that is the issue here, senses, intellect and the spiritual. Spiritual means our being, not only being as a personal self, is our universal self. And art towards that is Swami's view. We can criticize, I understand, I go with that kind of interpretation. Art gives, and I think Tagore got a Nobel Prize for that. Why the Western people also identifying the whole Western or any global personalities who touched these issues became prominent. No? So those people, Tagore, why he got the Nobel Prize? First Asian to win Nobel Prize. He spoke about the same issue, all about Upanishadic and nature. And nature, another thing I wanted to say, after Nietzsche, in Western philosophy, all about the so-called postmodern philosophers, they don't go with the real, because many people wrote about that Nietzsche is the entry point of postmodernism. He's not only emphasizing intellectualization of art, it's a kind of, because how first time in the Western history, after Nietzsche, the whole Western philosophy changed. After 100 years, first time we had Asian Philosophy Congress, we have Asian Philosophy Congress in 2010 in Delhi. But before that, once Korea, first time after 100 years, they had now, second one in China we had. Now they are recognizing Asian philosophy as philosophy. This is a kind of a deep existential hermeneutics. These are very core messages of our own philosophy. Like every like Upanishads, so many commentaries. Shankara gave so many commentaries, so many Vedantic gave different commentaries, all about commentaries. That is all hermeneutics. And there's another, even after Nietzsche, I think Nietzsche, because of, he says, I have a trans-European eye. Then he read, his classmate was writing, one Paul Joyce, and everyone knows, I think, philosophy of Upanishads in German, first time, Nietzsche's contemporary. After that, he read Upanishads, and I think through Upanishads and Buddhist philosophy, also he was understanding Buddhist philosophy, and he wrote about a lot of different issues. And that's why the so-called religion, and because of Kant is the first person who wrote out the theoretical theology is not at all important. We are not talking about metaphysical theory. So it goes with the kind of a deeper understanding that issue is Bhava. That is root for not only artistic creation, for any creation. Any kind of a creativity in our school, in our education system. And that's why even MIT, I feel, not MIT, IIT, a lot of our Ramakrishna Mission people are giving talks on meditation. So me Bhava. So why they are giving these kind of, they are all the famous MIT, or even once I was listening to MIT graduation speech. Why they are number one in the world class ranking? That means they say they integrate art and engineering. I mean, doesn't mean this so-called, that means everywhere, the engineering or mathematics or this, I think another professor from Oxford, he says, the so-called education system is a dead body, unidentified dead body, because we are just talking about mere words. This is all about in Chandogya Upanishad. First, Uttaraga and Swadhyaya gave this conversation. He was proud of all learning. Oh, I learned all these sciences, sciences, and he was very proud of learning. Then the Guru said, Father said, you didn't learn anything. Whenever you learn yourself, you learn everything. I think that is what happened in Coomaraswamy. And the Coomaraswamy is bringing all these things. And even Kant said, whoever masters this holistic idea can understand his words. Others, mere reading, mere words won't help us. And in mere words, the whole, if you talk on education system, all about mere words will never create anything. I think this is the deeper roots of creativity, not only in art and MIT, people are learning about meditation, not only in art, even all Silpa Shastras talk about dhyana. That all Coomaraswamy brings that in Dance of Shiva also. All should learn. That means that in dhyana, we transcend our personal self, connecting with the universal self. That is the root of art. I think that is Indian kind of India. I greatly appreciated that. But everywhere that is one reason that transcends kind of a narrow self, or kind of a narrow domestic walls, or narrow borders, or trans-cultural, trans kind of a issues.